the University of Timbuktu was having relationship with Toledo in Grenada, in Andalusia, Spain, with Kairouan in Tunisia, the University of Al-Azhar in Egypt, and other universities in Saudi Arabia, Zaria in Nigeria, and Kano.
Now, this is something I just noticed and thought of, and it's important, is that multiculturalism amongst the so-called Negroes, blacks, themselves. The Bilad is Sudan. Ibn Battuta, he says in his writings in East Africa, I traveled from the town of Aden by sea for 4 days and arrived at the city of Zaila, the city of the Barbasa, who are people of the blacks, and they are Sufi by right. Their country is a desert which extends for a 2 months journey. Its beginning is at Zaila, and its ending is at Mogadishu. Their livestock are camels, and their sheep are famed for their fatness. The inhabitants of Zaila are black in color, and the majority are rejectors. But it is a big city, and it has a great market, but it is the dirtiest, most desolate, and smelliest town in the world. The reason for its stink is the quantity of fish and blood of the camels they butcher in the alleyways. When we arrived, we preferred to pass the night on the sea, though it was rough. We did not spend the night in the town because of its squalor. And remember, he's talking about a pagan town. So, and he's prejudiced, of course, against non-Muslims. So, he could be making things up, talking about the city. The Nubians, the Zons, and the Ethiopians, the three most powerful of the black races, describes Mogadishu as a endless town in its size. Its people have many camels and sheep. Its people are powerful merchants. In it are manufactured the cloths named after it, which have no rival, and are transported as far as Egypt and elsewhere. The island of Kilwa, he says, is one of the most beautiful cities he had ever seen in all of his travels. He says that most of its inhabitants are Zons, and some people have taken that to mean that there's a significant, not a population from Persia and Arabia in the city, and the Zons are just passive. He talks about the Barbasa, who are not Zons themselves. So, the person who wrote this translation of Ibn Battuta, in his comments about this, he said, quote, in those times, the overland trade, which ran hundreds of miles into the interior, was in the hands of corporations of non-Muslim African merchants who brought goods down to the coast for transshipment. In other words, the towns would never have thrived as they did were it not for the production and commercial enterprise of the inland populations. Even so, then he says that the people on the coast were more interested in connections with the wider Islamic world. And Ibn Battuta also talks about Sultan Kilwa's expeditions against the non-believing Zons. And that's certainly true that they fought the non-believers. They could have just been wars that would have gone on anyway. They weren't just, allies with the people in the interior, or enemies. They were part of those people in the interior. They fought with them, and they trade with them. And since we hear things from an Arabic perception, plus they would want to, for political reasons, we don't really have a great idea of what the interior is. What if they were as interested in making contacts with faraway people in the interior as they were in the faraway Islamic world? Because the Bilad el Sudan is a pretty huge place. So that not only the cities could be multicultural, but not only because there were Arabs and Persians and others in those cities. There were different cultures of black people.
In Katanga province, we found here in the Great Zimbabwe, and that's clear evidence of this kind of networking.
Edward Matenga, director of the Great Zimbabwe site. Dr. Innocent Pikarai speculates further.
I would like to think there could have been trade between the Congo and the Great Zimbabwe. It could have been indirect because we do not know much of what happened between the Congo and the Lubalunda in southeastern parts of Sahiri, and between the Lubalunda and the copper producers of central Zambia. So these commercial conducts did take place either indirect or directly.
The Kanyok live today in the middle of the Democratic Republic of Congo and in the center of the continent, in an area where the trade networks of the Congo and Zimbabwe could well have overlapped. They sing a song exalting travel. Like the Bakongo and their neighbors, the Luba, the Kanyok were skilled in metalwork, both of a functional and decorative kind. The throwing knives of this region incorporate both features: sharp, three-bladed, highly decorated. They stand as potent symbols of power and skill, speaking across the centuries. Nigerian potter Lawson Oyekan conveys something of their beauty as he gazes at a collection of throwing knives at the British Museum in London.
Well, I find these pieces quite the stuff of dreams, even though they are intended to be things that will cause injury. I love them very much as beautiful things, not as dangerous things. I would be very proud to have achieved the level of understanding of this level of abstraction and craftsmanship